A Turkish plane crashed into a hill seconds before approaching the airport. There were important scientists on board. The accident, which left many question marks after it happened, is based on official accident reports and eyewitness accounts. First of all, hello everyone. I'm Fadi, the owner of the voice you've been hearing in the background all this time. Without further ado, I'd like to mention a few things about this accident, which is a little different from the others. First of all, I tried to include almost none of my own comments in the information I conveyed in the video. I used the same sources I used in previous videos, the official report of the accident, sources like Aviation Herald and ASN. In order to keep the video short, I will not list the sources one by one. I will leave the sources I used in the explanation section. Unlike other videos on YouTube that contain speculation and conspiracy allegations, in this video I will try to talk about official information. Without further ado, let's move on to the story of Flight 4203, which is the subject of many question marks. It was Friday, November 30th, 2007. At night, this Atlas jet Flight 4203 was preparing to depart from Istanbul Atatürk Airport to Isparta Süleyman Demirel Airport. The operator Atlas jet, like other domestic airlines in Turkey, had started to grow in the early 2000s with the opening of private operations. In these years, besides Atlas jet, airlines such as Onur Air Fly Air had also started to grow by planning domestic operations. This was an important development in order to ensure competition in the sector by allowing small businesses to enter the market dominated by Turkish Airlines. By the way, all three of the companies I have just mentioned have declared bankruptcy and left the sector in recent years. Atlas Jet had entered flight operations with Boeing's 757. Although the record of this aircraft type was quite clean, it increased the cost considerably for short flights. The large size of the aircraft was reducing the company's profit margin. Therefore, the company was in search of smaller aircraft with lower fuel costs. During this period, World Focus Airlines was experiencing financial difficulties. Atlas Jet leased the aircraft and painted it in its own colors in a short time. Going back to the flight, the pilots did their final checks. They got the airplane ready, so-called. I will explain the reason why I say so-called later in the video. The pilots got clearance from the controller and started taxiing to go to the runway. If we talk a little bit about the pilots and the passengers, in the left seat of the flight was 49-year-old Serhat Özdemir, a former Air Force pilot with 9,000 hours of experience. The captain had served in the military for 9 years and then got his commercial pilot license. The captain had started working in the right seat at Onur Air before Worldview Airlines. In 2000, he received type training for the MD-83 aircraft model from Onur Air and started flying. However, the pilot could not be promoted to captain at Onur Air even though he had a lot of experience. Over the years, the pilot received type training for different model aircraft such as the Airbus A300 and gained experience in different model aircraft. He had been a captain for 400 hours in the company he was currently flying for. 9,000 hours is a serious experience for a pilot. We can easily say that the captain is quite experienced. But besides 9,000 hours, this flight would be the captain's first flight to Isparta. The pilots received clearance to enter the runway and take off. They started to gain speed on the runway by giving full power to the engines. Everything seemed to be going smoothly for the time being. Reaching takeoff speed within seconds, the plane cut its wheels off the runway of Atatürk Airport and started to rise towards the darkness of the night. With over 3,000 hours of flight time, the first officer had spent almost all of those hours in military aircraft. In 2006, he had obtained his commercial pilot's license, and at the end of 2006, he was trained for FI, that is, instructor pilot. In 2007, the co-pilot transferred to World Focus Airlines and received type training for the MD-83 aircraft. Although he had flown in the military, he had a total of 150 hours of flight experience in airlines. In short, he was a very inexperienced pilot for airlines. Military piloting and civil aviation are very different things. On top of that, when pilots start their career in airlines, they fly the first 100 hours under the supervision of an experienced pilot behind them. But when the co-pilot was completing his first 100 hours, there was no pilot behind him supervising him. We can easily understand that there are mistakes in the company's training system even from this. In addition, the co-pilot had not flown to Isparta before and was unfamiliar with the area. As for the passengers, the reason why the accident involves so many conspiracy theories is that there were 6 important nuclear physicists among the 50 passengers. At that time, these 6 physicists were working on the element thorium to cover Turkey's energy needs. They were saying that only 50 tons of thorium could provide all of Turkey's energy needs and end our dependence on foreign energy. 6 scientists led by Professor Dr. Engin Arik were making this journey to attend a conference at Isparta Süleyman Demirel University. Physicist Engin Arik was one of our important scientists who actively worked on experiments at CERN, the European Nuclear Research Organization. It is these people and their projects that make the accident so important. But it was the company that was responsible for what was about to happen. And you know that in aviation accidents are not usually caused by a single mistake. It's a chain of errors. Going back to the flight, the pilots did their descent checks and started descending. Isparta Süleyman Demirel Airport is an airport surrounded by mountains, with Lake Burdur to the southwest. It was an airport that I used to fly from and used many times. I can easily say that all 4 sides of the airport are mountainous and hilly. The airport was not a very used airfield at that time, and it was a direction where not many flights were organized. Now, this is not the case. It is an airport used by many training aircraft and airlines, even by the military. But at that time, the lighting of the airfield and the region was not as good as it is now. Going back to the flight, the pilots made their descent, made a right turn and started to move on the airfield. They were going to plan a VOR approach. Until this stage, the pilots had proceeded by positioning Isparta directly on their route. At this stage, they entered the VOR procedure into the flight computer. Pilots plan landings by making use of assistive systems such as VOR. In this airport, there were no ILS, but there were VOR and localizer landing systems. The pilots preferred the VOR one of these landings. Now let's look at the chart on the screen in order to understand the accident. To explain it simply, the pilots were supposed to pass over the airport and go 11.4 miles over the airfield, where they had to make a procedure turn and align with the runway. Then they were going to plan an approach and landing on runway 05 over the lake. You can think of a procedure turn as a type of method used in situations where the aircraft has to turn 180 degrees. I will not go into more detail. The pilots flew over the runway, more precisely over the VOR, and they went out about 11.4 miles. But the pilots started to make a turn from the right, when what should have happened here was to make a left turn and then turn 180 degrees back to center the runway. At this stage, according to some allegations, the pilots followed the VOR procedure without canceling the route they had initially entered into the flight computer. Therefore, the system may have transmitted incorrect information to the pilots. Another allegation is that the computer system did not have up-to-date airport charts. These are just allegations, not accurate information. The pilots' ignorance of the airfield was also one of the major reasons why they did not realize their mistake. In short, the pilots turned in the wrong direction by incorrectly applying the VOR approach procedure and started approaching the hill. They could not see the hill they were approaching because it was pitch black. They were rapidly approaching danger. Within seconds, both pilots noticed the hill illuminated by the lights of the aircraft. Within seconds, Isparta Flight 4203 crashed with 57 people on board on the Tomb Hill in the Kesaborlu district. Unfortunately, everyone lost their lives, including 6 engineers. Now some pictures of the wreckage are coming up on the screen. The head, fuselage, and tail of the plane were scattered in different places. It took a year to prepare the final report of the accident. The investigators prepared a very detailed report. After the crash, it was rumored that the pilots were tired, but according to the report, both pilots had not flown for 24 hours, so there was no fatigue. The weather that day looked good, so why didn't the pilots get the warning of the hill in front of them? What I am going to tell you now is one of the most remarkable points of the accident. Under normal conditions, GPWS is mandatory for this type of aircraft. What is GPWS? Ground Proximity Warning System is a system that warns pilots when the aircraft starts to approach the ground. It is also the source of terrain pull-up warnings that you often hear in previous accidents. But this aircraft did not have this mandatory system. What was the reason? In the days before the accident, the ground proximity warning system of the aircraft had been removed and installed on another MD-83 aircraft for rent. Were the pilots not aware of this? Of course they were. While the pilots were supposed to check these systems before taking off, the pilots skipped this item. so the system could not give a warning to the pilots when the aircraft approached the terrain. If this system had been in place, perhaps today this accident would never have happened and this video would never have been shot. Some of the allegations about the accident. It is rumored that the black boxes of the plane were never found after the crash. They were even found in many YouTube videos. But according to the final report, both black boxes, namely the cockpit voice recorder, which records the voice in the cockpit, and the flight data recorder, which contains flight data, were recovered from the wreckage after the crash. The black boxes were sent to Germany for examination. These black boxes are very important for understanding the cause of the accident and establishing a cause and effect relationship. But according to the information obtained from the black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder had malfunctioned days before and the other black box, the flight data recorder, had stopped recording only 14 minutes after takeoff. There are also allegations that the flaps of the plane were not working. It is rumored that the pilots planned to land without flaps, but there is no clear information about this in the accident report. Unfortunately, like many other things, it is not known whether the flaps were working or not. As for the claim that the engines of the aircraft stopped, the accident report found that both engines of the aircraft were running before the accident. In short, there was absolutely no single cause or single factor in the accident. As you can understand from the accidents in the previous videos, these types of accidents are caused by a combination of many mistakes. At the very beginning of the flight, the pilots should not have taken off with the aircraft without GPWS, because it is forbidden to fly in the absence of the system that must be carried. We can easily say that the aircraft was definitely not ready for flight. But apparently the pilots didn't care. Were the pilots the only ones to blame? Of course not. When they looked at the past aircraft maintenance records of the owner of the aircraft, World Focus Airlines, they found many violations of the rules. The captain pilot had flown different types of aircraft for 5 years and may not have gotten used to the aircraft when he returned to this type of aircraft. The first officer had just entered the airline and was quite inexperienced. Perhaps most importantly, both pilots had not flown to the airport in Isparta beforehand and did not know the area. There was also insufficient visibility at the airport at night. There were also problems in the simulator trainings given to the pilots by the company. The plane was not equipped with GPWS. How many more factors could there be for an accident to happen anyway? Thank you for watching. In memory of the 57 people, including important scientists, who lost their lives in the crash,